Welcome in, agents. Today we're going in the Beechcraft Baron 58 from Nassau in the Bahamas to none other than the Havana airport in Cuba in honour and in celebration of 007 James Bond. That's right, welcome on board. Call sign today, Juliet Bravo 007. I kid you not, welcome in. James Bond, all the way back from the 60s is when it was started, 50s to the 60s and so on, has been a big part of my life since childhood, and I've really been a big fan of it. And I thought, since I'm a fan of it and I really enjoyed it, why not do a flight in honour of it? And this is something I've actually been planning since November last year. Yeah, so the original story, Casino Royale by Ian Fleming, came out in 1953, folks. That's how long ago it was. And believe it or not, the James Bond name came from that of the American ornithologist James Bond, who was a Caribbean bird expert and author of the definitive field guide Birds of the West Indies. So a little bit of backstory there for you before we get started. Really super to be doing this. He's flown and he's been to both of these places in films. He was in the Bahamas for many of the films, James Bond. One of the recent ones was as recent as Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. And Cuba was back, I remember Pierce Brosnan being in Cuba. And in Die Another Day, I believe it was. Yes, so many trips there. Let's get on with it. Let's get on with initiate the flight. Today we're going to be going in a blank livery because we have a mission here from Nassau to Cuba, so we don't want anybody really knowing who we are. With a call sign of JB007, we probably don't even need a tail number. It is just myself flying today with probably a little bit of baggage in the back. You know what it is like, folks, when you're an agent. So let's go, excuse me, weigh and balance. Now, we do need to refuel, so today I've gone with a sim brief rather than calculating it myself, just to save getting it wrong, although we will add more in, because as we've seen with the Beechcraft Baron in the past, it has been fairly inaccurate actually in terms of fuel burn, and we've tended to burn fuel more, so 252. Since we're flying on our own, I'm going to put 150 in each, so we're going to take an extra 50. Max 97, so we can only have a maximum of 97 in each, and that's in gallons, and this is in kg. I didn't actually consider this, folks, so I guess we're going to convert it from kg to gallons. That's fine, that'll only take a moment. They're giving me calculations here. I wish I wish it was a little bit simpler than this. I do have a fuel weight conversion thing actually, which I should use, which is a really cool little site, e6bx.com, and you could use that to convert your kilos to gallons, etc. So 252, about 92 gallons. Okay, we've got enough on board with a little bit extra. And if we need to refuel, we can do so. We'll try and fly as efficiently as possible. We will totally ignore the reference list with this plane because it's incorrect. So let's get rid of the packs off of there. Just us. And we've got quite a lot of baggage today. We've got about 20 to 30 kg of weight on board. Let's go ahead and do that. Apply. And let's get on with it, folks. Let's get our flight plan ended in. So the battery's coming on. Let's get our nav lights on. Let's get our mixtures and props fully forward. They were idle, which is where they need to be. Fuel selectors can come on. Cowl flaps are open. Let's just check the flight controls are free and correct. They are, but the Beechcraft Baron is always free and correct. We are using the reality expansion pack today, if you are curious to know. So yeah, fuel's coming up. It looks like we've got full tanks, which is exactly what we need. We'll have to wait as usual for these to warm up when we start the engine. I think we can go ahead and get it done pretty quickly. So I think in this plane, if I remember, we do put the engines on before the flight plan because the battery has the tendency to drain. Right, in that case then, we'll get the alternators on and I will stick the beacon on. We'll put the props fully forward. Fuel pumps are manual. Wait for that peak fuel flow. Now, in this plane, let me turn the sound down for you guys. This plane, the fuel flow there only needs to peak for a couple of seconds. Let's turn the sound over. Okay, so there we go. Now we pull them back to idle. Crank them a little bit and we can go for a clear prop on the left. Coming alive nice and well. Make sure you keep it around 1000 RPM. Let's get the instrument lighting on. So you have 1000 RPM to begin with, or between 1000 to 1200 RPM is fine. So 1100 would probably be acceptable. Clear prop on the right. Same thing there. We're just going to monitor the instruments. I'm going to make sure they're close together on the throttles and the RPM there, so we can see that the prop synchronization is sort of slowing down to show that they're getting into sync. We can put the prop sync on. Should really have it on before engine start, but alright. So you can see there the temperature in the oil will take a while to rise, which is perfectly normal. Usually when you get to the engine run up stage it will speed up, so it will be in the green zone. It is a very hot day as well, so it probably is quicker. In fact, it is very, very quick. I can see the needles racing into the green zone, which is good for us because it means we can taxi sooner. Okay, taxi lights coming on. Actually, no, avionics coming on. We'll do the taxi lights afterwards. Transponder to standby and we'll enter the flight planning. So I'm expecting pretty simple departures today, yeah. So it's pretty simple. We are IFR rules and there's no SIDS and stars. It's just the standard waypoint list, which I guess is alright. We do have traffic in the area. Now, that's obvious because we're in airspace that's controlled. But for the sake of, because we're sort of flying under the radar, so to speak, we don't technically need to give a call out unless we're commanded to by ATC. And even then, the chance of having ATC down here is very, very slim. So there's our first waypoint. Now, I have flown this route before in the Aerostar 601, which is extremely quick. The Baron's a little bit slower, so probably about an hour and a half of flight time. There is some airways in there, but we're already concerned with waypoints. So we want Farco for the next one. So Farco to Yuha, that's probably short for Muha, which is of course final destination in Cuba, Havana Airport. There we go, simple flight plan, simple flight rules. Flight plan is, well, we'll check the cruising altitude actually while we're here. So cruising altitude today, folks, we're going to have a step climb to not very high up, that can't be right, 4,000 feet. 5,000 feet, unless it means that is so low down. I guess that's how high would it be then, 5,000. I think just for the sake of fuel efficiency, we're going to go up to 9,000 feet. Let's check the cruising winds at 9,000 feet. Doesn't come up with it, it's come up with 8,000, I guess we could reuse that. Plus 14, so I guess we're not even going to drop down into minus for this cruise. The wind is also very mild. That's extremely, you know, good for us as pilots and agents, of course. We don't really want to get into the pickle. Okay, so engines are coming into the green zones. We're going to get taxied into the active runway today. So takeoff data, runway 14, QNH 3002. Quite high pressure, as you can tell. And that's normal for Bahamas, pretty standard. There we are, we're probably going to depart with flaps up, and we don't need anti-ice, of course. Let's get going, let's check the charts actually while we're here. You know what, let's skip the charts. We can do a little bit of a sneaky thing here, folks, and go on to explain 12 map. So 14, okay, so it's directly ahead. We just had an arrival there. And it looks like there's a few more people here coming in. 3 aircraft coming in at once to the airport. That means we do have to communicate with them. So we'll be taxiing there via, it looks like hotel, to runway 14. Okay. Let's tune over to 1228. We are already on it. Okay, call sign Juliet Bravo 007. Brakes released. get a little bit of movement out of the aircraft in a second. Hang on a second, folks. We've now got 80's information. Usually I honestly didn't expect to have ATC out here today. For real. Absolutely for real. It is actual fire though to have it out here sometimes. Yeah, they've just come online and it looks like we've got some severe weather. Thankfully though, they're not actually covering our area. So we have got ATIS, but that's such a pain, I guess. We just logged on and it's just come online. Oh well. Let's get on with the flight, folks. Let's go runway 14. Here we go. Flight direction is going to go 10 degrees pitch up. This is going to be our takeoff attitude. You certainly feel the weight of those wings now. We've got the fuel in them. Incredible. Shame about the weather. Shame it's not as good as it could be. All the way from 1953, and I believe that a lot of the stories are actually written in GoldenEye, which is a location where Ian Fleming wrote a lot of the books. And that's actually one of the films as well. I have to say, my favourite James Bond, you know, we have arguments about this all the time, fans probably do. For me, you know, there's nothing like the classics, but then again, I was really a huge fan of Pierce Brosnan. Let me know what your favourite film is in the comments. Let me know what your favourite James Bond is. Also, let me know what film, this is a little bit of a quiz for you guys. I know I said some films earlier about the Bahamas, but let me know which films were set in the Bahamas. I can name a few of them. And also let me know in the comments what films were set in Cuba. And if you want bonus points, name the actor that played James Bond during those films. And we'll get into some of the lore and stuff when we're in the air, when we're a bit more stabilised. Right, we're going down hotel to runway 14. I think this should be a pretty simple departure, so let's turn our heading onto course. Now, because it's a hand-flown departure and not a sit or start procedure today, it means we can turn out our discretion any direction we need to. I think in this case today it probably would make sense to go to the right hand side to get onto course. Mode Charlie on the transponder. So the windsock is giving us a crosswind. Let's see what X-Plane 12's map says. So yeah, about 7 to 8 knots, I think. We should be able to handle it. Ailerons into the wind. Let's get our engines run up here and we'll do a warm check and we'll check the flaps and stuff as well. So this is the whole point, I think. It's not too clear at this airport where it is. Yes, here it is, hotel, runway 14, parking brake coming on, taxi lights off. We're just checking symmetrical deployment there and we'll do a run up, so bringing them up to 1500. We should be in the green by now as well. We are getting into it. So 1500, and we're going to do a little bit of a check on the props. Very, very little check. Not too much at all. 1700, we're going to check the magnetos and anti-ice. I'm going to check all the anti-ice for this. There's no obvious issues there. Propellers, again checking those. My magnetos are turned off for some reason. Let me turn them on. And we'll go left side first. Okay, not too bad. There's no significant drops there. Engines seem pretty good. And then the last one for a 2200 for a prop test. Favoring of the props. Only ever so slightly. It has the tendency sometimes to jump around. I think because it's hot weather, it's making it a little bit easier to feather them today. Brilliant. Engines are alive. Okay, landing lights coming on, strobes coming on. We get the transponder to altitude mode. Now, there is a little bit of rough weather there, so I guess we would need the weather radar just in case. We have got storms moving in, quite severe weather, so we have to outrun this. We're racing against the time. Because if that storm catches up with us, we will most likely probably not make it out of it. So here's the procedure when we take off. We lift off, we get the flaps up, gear up if we need to. The flaps up, we need the gear up, the cow flaps closed, the yaw damper comes on, and then we can just fly it onto the course that the GPS is set. So we set, in fact, we pre-select the course. It should already be set there. It's given us a, we should be locked on there onto it. Let's see if we can change it. Yes, we can change our course. So let's change our course. And it will probably say it here on the GNS as well. No, sometimes it will. So set the course there. Initial heading set. Parking brake released. Flight controls are free and correct. Juliet Bravo 007. Departure from runway 14 Nassau. I thought we were warming up at the engines there, but we barely got to 40 Celsius. Everything's looking good. Trim should be neutralized in the takeoff position. Runway 14 is established. Compass is fine. It aligns with the heading mode. So here we go. And we're up. Let's get the gear up. Very windy on departures today. Landing lights come off. Yeah, we've got that wind coming from the right hand side I forgot about. Okay, cow flaps to reduce the drag. We're squawking a random squawk code, which is probably for the best actually. Okay, here we go onto our departure heading, and then when we get on departure heading we'll engage the autopilot and help us to continue our climb up to probably, because I don't think 5,000 is a good altitude, so maybe up to maybe 7,000 or 8,000 feet. And I've reduced those props back to 2,500 to keep the engine from exploding. And you can see there it actually smooths out the airflow a little bit over the plane's wings. There we are, so we're going to get on course now. We can keep adjusting our heading and our course book as required. I'm going to select heading mode and vertical speed mode and then autopilot on. So now we'll continue climbing about 140, which is pretty good. Really warm conditions are in our favour and helping to keep the plane flying really well. Nassau traffic JB007 climbing through 3,000 feet for 9,000. And wait till we get to the line, and then when we get to the line I'll intercept it with the navigation mode, and from there we'll continue on to Cuba. Welcome aboard folks, thank you for joining me, and thank you to those who are catching up on replay mode. On Grantham I stream 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Usually at now at 4 PM GMT time, and we do a variety of flights from general aviation to commercial. Okay, well I say at this point we could probably be leading the mixtures a little bit. We slow down a bit there during the climb, which is not good, so let's bring the mixtures back. Probably 23 gallons an hour, maybe 22, but in this case I'm going to keep pulling it back until we get about 16 gallons per hour. I'm doing it nice and early here so we can conserve fuel as soon as possible, really. Rudder trim is slightly out, actually. I don't know why that's the case. We're flying a brand new plane today, no maintenance required on it. Yeah, so peculiar on that flight climb thing to 5,000 feet. Maybe we should level off at 5,000. I'll go up to 6,000 then, just to be on the safe side. But that just seems really too low down. If we're going to be cruising there, it's 5,000. We don't really need to have 2,500 RPM. We could bring it back to 2,300. It's only at 6,500 feet and above. You have to have 2,500 RPM. And this way we can probably burn. We probably would need a higher mixture setting, but I'm going to keep it nice and low. As you can see, EGT is nice and high. I guess that's a good thing. Maybe not, because it's a hot day, so we might have a fire on board. There's no pre-selecting altitude in this, which is kind of a pain. So I'm on course because of select navigation. There we go. We should transition now to the pink line without any issues. And 6,000 feet. There we go. Let's bring our propellers back all the way to 2,300. And the mixture setting, well, I will leave it where it is and just see how the plane goes for a little bit. As soon as you start to get too fast, I'll reduce it. Maybe I can reduce it to 2,300 actually. Let's do that. There she goes. We're tracking outbound now for the Nassau viewer. Onwards to Cuba, we do have a slight crosswind, but very mild, so it shouldn't impact the flight too much. James Bond, Ian Fleming's creation, you know, 1953 is insane. The original movie that came out for Casino Royale was actually a comedy spoof. And believe it or not, it was actually one of my favourite James Bonds, and it still is, because it's just hilarious. I know it's starring some really well-known actors as well, but then they remade it later on and made it into a more serious film. Yeah, that for me will always be a great addition and a great start to the series. Then of course we had the Sean Connery era, where yeah, he had a series of 4 or 5 movies where he did extremely well. I think Sean Connery probably one of the best James Bonds. They're all fantastic, but the original films really are peak cinema for me. A Secret Agent, written and created by Ian Fleming, who featured him in 12 novels. It's bizarre as well, there is only 12 novels and 2 short story collections, but there's been a dozens of movies towards this character, and games as well. For me, in terms of gaming, I think the Pierce Brosnan era of video games were hands down the best. Games like Nightfire, games like Everything or Nothing. Those were, to me, additional films because they were that well made. Believe it or not, since Fleming died in 1964, which is again a really interesting fact, because we've had James Bond for decades after his death, and the original film only came out in the early 60s, so you didn't really get to see any of his creations brought to the big screen, which is unfortunate. Maybe one of them. But yeah, after that, other people actually wrote James Bond novels. Some of those are Kingsley Arms, Crystal Wood, John Gardner, etc. Anthony Horowitz, but I think those are more for kids. Okay, we're encountering some rough weather here, folks. Just felt it notching us off to the right. Yeah, something bad going on here with the plane. How's our speed doing? Weather radar's not picking up any sort of detrimental weather at the moment, just clouds. Just keep the fuel flow through to 16.5 to keep it. Keep it nice and smooth. The James Bond franchise is one of the highest grossing media franchises of all time. I'm not surprised. I really am not. Probably one of the best things about the United Kingdom and England is James Bond. It's definitely a cultural thing as well. It's the 5th highest grossing film series to date. Curious, what are the other 4 if that's for the 5th? And yes, the original film 1962's Dr. No, starring Sean Connery as Bond, so obviously Ian Fleming got a chance to see that, and probably got a chance to see the second film, From Russia With Love, as well. The last film to be released was 2021, No Time to Die, starring Daniel Craig. The James Bond era and the Daniel Craig era was a very strange one. I remember seeing Daniel Craig in Casino Royale 2006. I was a child back then, and I'm still blown away by it. I thought it was a fantastic film, and it really was. But then, like, as the series went on, his films just got they weren't very good afterwards. Excuse me for a second, folks. Good timing. Yeah, so the James Bond era with Daniel Craig, I felt like it went downhill a bit, and then at the last moment it got pulled back with No Time to Die, which I actually thought was a good film. I enjoyed it. But the problem is the ending on that one. They really screwed the fans over, so don't get me started on it. and how they screw James Bond over. I guess you've got to take something and ruin it eventually, haven't they? Eon Productions, MGM, etc., the original, you know, studios and publishers of the movies. Two independent Bond film productions, Casino Royale, which is the original 1967 spoof that I was talking about, and that I do recommend highly. It's hilarious, it stars some really well-known actors, and it's just a great experience. Never Say Never Again, of course, is one of the other spin-offs with, believe it or not, Sean Connery returned to the role of James Bond in 1983. I have that on DVD, and I have to say that I know it's controversial and that people don't like it, but for me, I think Never Say Never Again is actually a really, really good James Bond film. It's a remake of The Thunderball, which starred also himself in. And it was also interesting with that film because Thunderball for me was one of the best, if not one of the best James Bond films ever made. To see it remade and to actually play out differently, that was really, really, really cool. It was kind of fire actually to see it and think, wow, this is not even a mainstream James Bond movie and it's still a James Bond movie, you know, that kind of feeling. Of course, he created the character as a Central Intelligence or Intelligence Officer in the Secret Intelligence Service, known as MI6, a real organisation. In fact, during the movies, James Bond was taking place in the actual SIS building in London, and you will see many famous exterior shots of it. One little bit of insight, actually, folks, is when they did the scene in Skyfall, and Skyfall was another amazing film, where they are driving towards MI6 headquarters and there's a bomb explosion on the window. Now, in the film it makes out the window's blown up and that's, you know, there's all this stuff spraying out, but in reality the building is in fact both bomb-proof and bulletproof, which means you couldn't blow up the window like that. It would simply be impossible. And also the amount of security there is it would be very impossible to plant anything on the building to begin with. So yeah, just a little bit of insider, like, not insider knowledge, anyone can find that out if they go down there and, you know, do the research. He was also a Royal Naval Reserve Commander, and he based his creation on a number of people he came across in his time in the Naval Intelligence Division and the 30 Assault Unit during the Second World War. He admitted that Bond was a compound of all the secret agents and commando types I met during the war. And again, reflected really well in the movies through, you know, Dr. No all the way down to No Time to Die. James Bond was constantly working with the military and the Navy throughout those movies, military intelligence especially. So, moving on with the story as time went on, Ian Fleming's brother and a number of others have also provided some aspects of Bond's makeup, but that's something I don't want to focus on during this. We want to focus on the original creation, and the original creation was to make an MI6 agent which was charismatic, somewhat sexist, and somewhat egotistical as well. And they have dampened him down much over the years, which it can work well, but I think they should keep that original Bond idea. That's why I think the Pierce Brosnan era was one of the most potent, because that is the last era where he smokes and he sleeps with a lot of women and he gambles a lot. But then in the Daniel Craig era, it's dampened down. There's no cigars, there's not as many women, there's just not as much, not as much going on there, to be honest. He did keep his alcoholism though, I'll give them that. He still was an alcoholic very much through the Daniel Craig era. But again, I think they probably will dampen that out and get rid of it in future additions to the movies, which is a little bit disappointing. I would say actually, yeah, that both Sean Connery and Timothy Dalton were two of the best, and certainly Pierce Brosnan for me as well. and Timothy Dalton's The Living Daylights and License to Kill. That was it. Those two were fantastic. Very, very, very different kind of Bond films. Probably darker than most of the others, but certainly worked. I think it's fascinating that his name was based on the American ornithologist James Bond. He was in the Caribbean, Caribbean bird expert. This is a direct quote from Ian Fleming in 21st of April 1962. He said, "When I wrote the first one in 1953, I wanted Bond to be an extremely dull, uninteresting man to whom things happened. I wanted him to be a blunt instrument. When I was casting around for a name for my protagonist, I thought, by God, James Bond is the dullest name I ever heard." Interesting, because I think now, with all the movies and books and success it's had, it's actually one of the most interesting names that's ever been created. Of course it is. Everything is boring and dull until it becomes popular, which is something that probably needs to change in society, but yeah. Imagine if it had been super dull and uninteresting, or maybe he is and I'm just a huge fan. Imagine how differently the film would have turned out. The Ian Fleming novels. Now this is something I'm really keen on, because there are not actually that many novels. There are only 12 novels. Whilst he was serving in the Naval Intelligence Division, Ian Fleming had planned to become an author. He told a friend that "I'm going to write the spy story to end all spy stories." And then on February 17th, 1952, he began writing his first James Bond novel, Casino Royale, at his GoldenEye estate in Jamaica. So there you go, folks. That is how GoldenEye exists. It's because it was his estate where he used to write the novels. Now I did know that, and that is very, very cool. I think you can in fact visit that house and see it for yourselves. He wrote all his Bond novels during the months of January and February of each year, and he started the story shortly before his wedding to his pregnant girlfriend, and we don't need to know about that stuff. Basically, I think he was trying to distract himself, is what I'm seeing here, from his actual upcoming obligation as a husband and father, but also creating one of the most legendary characters in literary and cinematic history. The books that he published, or were actually sadly published after his death, because there was hesitation to publish his initial novel. And I guess they saw the success of it, and then they published the rest of them. Well, it's unfortunate that he didn't see the 12 novels and 2 short story collections being published. They were Casino Royale, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, Diamonds Are Forever, From Russia We Love, Dr. No, Goldfinger, For Your Eyes Only, Thunderball, The Spy Who Loved Me, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, You Only Live Twice, The Man with the Golden Gun, and then in 1966, Octopussy and The Living Daylights. Let me know, what is your favourite James Bond movie? I've mentioned a few of mine. I think definitely, if I was going, let's name 3. So originally it would have been like something like Goldfinger, but as time's gone on, I actually prefer Thunderball than I always have. Thunderball for me is up there. You know, GoldenEye's up there. It's very hard. I would even say probably Octopussy actually is up there as well. That's quite a good film. But then again, then you got the hidden gems like on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is probably one of the most serious James Bond films, and also just one of the best spy films in general. the whole brainwashing tactic by Blofeld. I really hope they bring that back at some point, because that was extremely funny it was funny to watch, but it was also quite scary as well. Let's see what went on in the gaming industry in terms of video games. I played a few of them. They made a lot of stuff though, folks. They made various spin-off novels. They made like articles and books on young Bond. They made Moneypenny Diaries, adaptations for television, radio, and comic books. Yeah, 1983's Octopussy actually had a Marvel accompanying comic book, which is cool. Marvel's usually known for superheroes. I guess maybe they considered James Bond a superhero back then. In March 2022, this for me is sad news, and I think probably what caused the franchise to go in the wrong direction, to be fair. It was purchased by Amazon. I think we can all agree that was a bad choice. And of course, the lineup of 6 Bonds so far: Sean Connery's period from 1962 to 1967, and then the addition of 1971, and of course the Never Say Never Again film, which is not actually listed there. Next we have George Lazenby in a one-off 1969 on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Roger Moore in quite a few films from 73 to 85, Timothy Dalton in 2 from 1987 to 89, Pierce Brosnan from 95 to 2002, and then Daniel Craig from 2006 to 2021, which you can see there actually that the Daniel Craig era, I think it lasted too long. That era. They should have stopped after Skyfall, and maybe even after Spectre, and just stopped at that point. I think they should have a rule: if a James Bond goes on for more than 5 years, they just cut it off and don't do any more films with that actor. And the reason is, obviously, they should replace them every few years to keep it fresh. That's just my take on it, though. Because if you look at the dates, 2006 to 2021, that's almost 20 years, which is insane. I do know for a fact, though, that I don't know where I read it, but Pierce Brosnan was supposed to come back for Casino Royale. And you know what actors are like, and it doesn't matter who they are. If they don't get paid enough, then they don't come back for the film, which I think is what happened with Casino Royale. So unfortunately, Pierce Brosnan didn't get the chance to do it, although I think that would have been a good way for his era to have ended. The MGM being selling it to Amazon is not something I agree with. I think that explains why Spectre and No Time to Die were really missing the mark in many respects. And of course the non-Eon films, Casino Royale and Never Say Never Again, which are really, really good, and you should watch them. They're definitely James Bond films, although they're not officially classed as them. Video games, here we are. This is the part I've been waiting for. Let's just check on our flight actually before we do. So yeah, we're still on the way there to Cuba. We don't have any issues. Pretty clear weather actually. Do we need to change anything here on speeds? I think we could probably increase the mixture a little bit. EGT is still very high. Maybe we can increase the throttle. Let's keep it at 2400. That'll give us a few more knots. Yeah, because we're countering a sort of little bit of a headwind now, aren't we? Anyway, back to my favourite part. 1983, the first Bond game was released. James Bond 007, developed and published by Parker Brothers, was released for the Atari, Commodore and something else. Since then there have been numerous... I don't know about that one by the way, the James Bond 007. I've never heard of it. I wasn't born then. I'm not that old, folks. Here we are, James Bond in video games. The early era in the early 80s and then into the 90s, they're probably not worth mentioning because, to be fair, they're not James Bond sounding games. Then we had the Nintendo era. Now this is where the GoldenEye era began, with 1997's GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64. By far, probably one of the most popular James Bonds ever released and still being played to this day. I still have nights, I'm not joking, I've had nights where I've been on YouTube and then all of a sudden it gets better. I get a smile on my face because somebody is streaming the original GoldenEye. It's happened a few times now, and when people do that, when people stream those old James Bond games, you know, GoldenEye, Nightfire, that is a really, really cool thing. And the reason is because back when it came out, people weren't streaming. YouTube didn't even exist when these games were released. YouTube only started in 2006. So yeah, people didn't have a chance to stream it back then. Back then, I say that like it was yesterday because I actually do remember it. The games came out, we would come home from school and play on them, and then we'd go out, talk to our friends and tell them about them. We didn't have like... We didn't stream YouTube, we didn't make videos of it, we just enjoyed games for what they were, which I think is fantastic. But now everybody just... that's a good thing I do enjoy. I like those occasional streams of GoldenEye, one of the best. Then we had the Electronic Arts era, again, very, very good era with some good games. They had Tomorrow Never Dies in 1998. The World Is Not Enough, so both of those would probably be a bit of a miss in terms of the fan base. In 2002, Nightfire was released, probably one of the best James Bond games ever made. Coincided with the 40th anniversary of the film franchise, using Brosnan's likeness for the Bond character but not his voice. And then in 2004, EA released Everything or Nothing, which is developed by Redwood for the GameCube, PlayStation 2 and Xbox. Unlike the previous two installments, Everything or Nothing is a third-person shooter with driver missions, and it stars the voices and likenesses of Pierce Brosnan, Judi Dench, Willem Dafoe and John Cleese. That is also one of the best James Bond games ever made as well. I highly recommend those: Nightfire, Everything or Nothing, and of course GoldenEye. There are later games that came out, such as GoldenEye Rogue Agents. From Russia with Love, I had a brief spell on that, which was actually not too bad in 2005. But it wasn't my favourite by far. And then of course in 2006 they released a game based on the upcoming Casino Royale, but it ended up being cancelled because it wouldn't align with the film's release, which is not really unexpected. Lots of games get cancelled. Now, I played Quantum Solace. That's a game from 2008, but that was a very, very different experience. It was very, very slow. it wasn't quite up to the same level as those older games. In fact, since those older games, I don't think there's been one decent good James Bond film, game since that period. There really hasn't been anything quite on those levels. Quantum of Solace and Bloodstone, never played them properly because they weren't very interesting, to be fair. And then, of course, recently we just had a James Bond release by IO Interactive. But again, very, very much missing the mark for the fan base. Cancelled games: Octopussy 1983, GoldenEye 007. Was planned for the Virtual Boy, never heard of that, but it was cancelled in 1996. Cancelled Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough. Racing sequel Bond 6 for 2005. They have cancelled a lot of stuff. Lego James Bond was cancelled. Now that would have been super interesting. Of course, what is James Bond without the gadgets? Some of the coolest gadgets ever been created have been in films. And in the games, of course. The original games. My favourite gadget, there's so many, but I think the watch is probably one of the cooler ones. I'm talking about the watch where he had a laser on it, and he also had a little wire that popped out, and he could use that to rappel across objects. He used that in GoldenEye, actually, that watch. So that is probably one of the coolest gadgets he's ever had, along with the pen, of course. Then you've got the glasses from, believe it or not, the Pierce Brosnan era again, where he could see through people's dresses and clothing to see whether they concealed weapons on them. Things like the Sean Connery from Russia With Love suitcase, briefcase, which had a knife built in, and it also contained rounds for the ammunition, along with gold sovereigns. Another cool little feature. And then, of course, if you open the briefcase the wrong way, a gas cartridge would blow up in your face. Let me know what your favourite gadget is. But that attaché case from Russia With Love was absolutely brilliant. Attaché case. Oh yes, of course, the Lotus submarine. That was absolutely fantastic. And that watch indeed was top tier. That is something that I tried to get my hands on at one point. I tried to get our hands on the replica, but they are so expensive. Of course, vehicles, you got the Lotus submarine. You have Little Nelly from You Only Live Twice, which was a small gyrocopter, which was, I guess, really nimble, could get out of small places. Yes, from Q Branch, the Little Nelly Autogyro. Cinematically speaking, our hero James Bond has been a major influence within the spy genre since the release of Dr. No in 1962. I have seen some good spy films and I've seen some bad ones. Some obvious ones to mention would be things like The Man from Uncle, which is a really good spy film. I really enjoyed it. It's also got a bit of humour in there. That reminded me a lot of James Bond. Spin-offs included the 1964 film Carry On Spying. Now, if anybody saw that film and the Carry On films, they are really good. They're a British series of movies where it's sort of like carry on and then followed by another word, and they get more and more bizarre as they go on, especially the later movies. Yeah, the Bourne series is a good example of a good spy film. Also one of them, and I'm also a fan of Michael Caine. Obviously, these are all British actors here, but Michael Caine had the Harry Palmer series. Now, he did some really good films, really good spy films. It wasn't like as action-filled as James Bond, but I think they were pretty good, and they had a lot of success with those. Those Harry Palmer series, by the way, with Michael Caine, were actually produced by Harry Saltzman, who also used key crew members from the Bond series, including designer Ken Adams, editor Peter Hunt, and composer John Barry. So I guess there is a lot of crossover in terms of development. And of course, that The Man from Uncle I've just mentioned is something I'd recommend. Let's watch a clip of that jetpack from Thunderball, shall we? This is it. She's just escaping. This is literally the introduction scene to the movie. That's it, 27 seconds. Very short clip. I think that was a bit faster than in the movie, actually. It seems a lot longer when you watch it on screen. I guess that's it then. I mean, has James Bond era come to an end? Probably not. But I do feel like the movies have been off for a while now, because it's been 5 years since we had No Time to Die, which is quite a long time between Bond movies. There's been a lot of speculation on who's coming next, and of course today our flight in honour of the James Bond series. We don't really want to say who it will be because we don't know. But I'd like it to be someone who's obviously British, who's a man, he's got dark hair, he looks like the part basically of James Bond. That's what we should do, we should raise a poll. Who do you think is going to be next? I got a feeling it won't be who we expect it to be, unfortunately. Yeah, maybe the era has come to an end. It may continue in gaming and with memorabilia, but maybe they won't make another movie. Let's go to 7,000 feet. I just feel like climbing a little bit higher at the moment so we can get a little bit more speed. In fact, yeah, 7,000 and we'll bring the props up to 2,500. Yeah, 7,500 feels a little bit natural, and this way we can have a bit more speed. It's changed now into tailwind as well, so we got a bit of both. A bit of a tailwind and a bit of a headwind. You see there, we're right on the line, but from this angle it's going into us, and then from here it's sort of changing into a tailwind there, which is going to hopefully push us through some of that rough weather that we're expecting. Again, we'll just leave them props at 2,500 and we can bring this fuel back. Probably to 16 now. You notice the higher up we are, the less of an EGT peak we have, which is, I don't know whether that's normal. I'd say it probably isn't. 16.5 gallons. If we want, we could do 2,600 RPM if we wanted to get there super quick, but we're already going, you know, 200 knots, so we have already built up a bit more speed by climbing. Remember folks, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 PM GMT time. Your likes and comments go a long way. Appreciate them a lot. apologies about the clicking and the sound of the mouse and keyboard as well. I didn't realise it was so loud. Using a different type of microphone, I didn't realise how sensitive it was. Oh, we got some interesting facts in the chat, folks. Blofeld's hideout on Her Majesty's Secret Service is just around the corner from the Pilates factory, part of which was used as Goldfinger's Swiss hideout. Wow. I do recall something about that in the past. I read a James Bond article on it years ago about where they were filmed, but I forgot about it. Maybe it was in it, maybe it wasn't. That's really, really interesting to know. Thank you. Goldfinger Swiss I mean, Goldfinger's like one of those iconic bad guys, isn't he? We don't forget him easily, but he was never really that tough to begin with. All he had was the giant laser in the beginning to try and take out Bond. And realistically, he relied on Oddjob to do his dirty work. Yeah, there's been so many recognisable bad guys, and some really, really average bad guys as well. My favourite is actually from, you know, the original movies. The bad guys in the originals, you know, things like Goldfinger, Dr. No, Blofeld, of course. They stood out more than the modern day villains. Scaramanga from The Man with the Golden Gun, another classic. And his little sidekick on the island, and that was really cool. Actually, that's a classic film. First Roger Moore film, 1970. Oh no, second one was it? 1973, 1974, something like that. We are entering Cuban airspace. Anyway, we've just passed into it from the Bahamas. We're going to be inbound to Havana pretty much within the next 30 minutes. Next flight, folks, I think we would do a continuation of this because I'm quite enjoying this James Bond excuse me. Nostalgia is a better word. I can't even pronounce it, what I'm trying to say. We'll continue with our nostalgic, happy memory-filled flights of an era which is probably one of the best. Those original films and just that whole series all the way up to the ending. With our next flight, as we fly to the studios, we will fly to the studios where they film the movies. How about that? I actually had the opportunity to go to one of the studios many years ago now, and it was a brilliant experience. It wasn't even for James Bond, it was just the studio it was filmed in. Really big place. Tons and tons of sets. Yeah, you guys seem to like Moonraker. I think Moonraker is a great film. One of the few space adventures actually that he went into. Moonraker stands out, I think, because of that. I think that was the only time James Bond actually goes into space. The only other time I could think of was in the game Nightfire, and the climax of that was set in space. But yeah, Drax, a really cool, memorable character as well. Christopher Lee, of course, as the Golden Gun Scaramanga. You have to wonder why. I mean, obviously he was like a really well-trained assassin as well, but on his island when he was practicing with his Golden Gun, he would practice shooting James Bond. So obviously somebody had contracted. He was obviously being contracted out. I remember the plot now. He's been contracted out to kill James Bond, but you got to question what his actual training ground was for other than that, because who else did he take out realistically? He didn't take out many people in that film, only a few of them. I do see you newcomers as well. Really appreciate you being here. It's good to have you on board. And to the new recent subscribers, there's been quite a few of you recently. The goal for the channel is 1,000. Feel like I should just throw that in there. I don't know why. Yeah, the new James Bond game seems to be missing the mark, I think. Personally, I don't think it's quite as good as people are making out, but the reviews seem to be giving it quite high marks at the moment. There was, in fact, that's a good point, and we should bring that up as part of our little bit of history for the series. When the filming that took place in Pinewood was, fortunately, you know, happened before that as well, and then there was a fire there. You are correct. A fire at the 007 studios at Pinewood. That sounds right. I do remember that there was a fire there, but the studios are still there, I believe. There's so many. That Pinewood Studios is one of the most that's why we will do a flight to the studios, because they are so memorable, because they've been used to film multiple films there, multiple series, from James Bond to, you know, some really big titles which we'll get into. James Bond, the Fantastic Four. You are right, Star Wars. The sequel trilogy of the Skywalker saga called Pinewood Studios home for 5 years. So that would have been the newer films from The Force Awakens in 2015 all up to 2018. The Muppets, Carry On films, of course, Star Trek. Yeah, some really super names. The most famous is probably got to be James Bond and Star Wars. She was. Maud Adams was a recognisable woman in them. Was she in Octopussy? I can't remember her films. I think she was in Octopussy, wasn't she? Yeah, Octopussy, that was it. And there's a few recurring women actually throughout the series, now that I think about it. My favourite Bond girl? Well, I don't know. I don't really have a favourite. I'm sure James Bond doesn't have a favourite either. Although he seemed to get attached to Vesper, which I found... The thing about the going into like the Daniel Craig era again, and I just can't help bring up the flaws in that series. Like, they were good films for the most part. Casino Royale was great, but then they tried to get him attached to this woman called Vesper who actually betrayed him, and I don't understand that, because he's a spy and he's actually had a lot of women killed over his lifetime, so, and he's not generally been too upset about it. Not forgetting that he actually got married. He got married twice in the movies. And even when he lost his wife Len, he didn't reminisce about it for years, did he? We didn't really hear much about it. But then when this Vesper comes along and betrays him, he's sad about it, and he continually thinks about it for years after she's died. And then in No Time to Die, he goes back to visit her gravestone, which I find absolutely bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. But actually, then again, I do remember Bond reminiscing about his perished wife, but it was only very brief. I think I remember that when James Bond... Yeah, that's it, because Blofeld turns up in a helicopter. And he's like he's remote controlling a helicopter, that's it. He gets Bond in it, remote controls it, and then James Bond takes control, gets Blofeld on his wheelchair, and then dumps him into the top of a chimney. It got to be the greatest scene in a James Bond film, honestly. It's hilarious. It's in For Your Eyes Only, 1981, when he drops him into it. It's hilarious. I do recommend that film. Again, is there a bad James Bond film? Well, there are a few out there. They're not great. I think we probably should get ready to land in Cuba, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for travelling with Grantham CPT today. Memorable flight in memory of Sir James Bond, 007. Oh yes, 18 minutes. So we're going to get descended now, I think, down to, back down to 5,000 feet. Engines are doing well. We've not burned much fuel, to be fair. Temperature's going to be a little bit on the high side today. I mean, it's still in the green, but it's higher than it would usually be because of the outside air temperature. You know, it's still 20 degrees almost outside. The scene with that chimney is from For Your Eyes Only. It is a James Bond film. It's the intro scene to that movie, actually. It's really, really probably one of the better scenes. Really hilarious. The Roger Moore era, which is strange actually, because that was probably the most serious film he did was For Your Eyes Only. Then again, the last three were pretty good now that I think about it. For Your Eyes Only, then he did Octopussy, then he did A View to a Kill. To me, actually, Roger Moore's films, I don't know, maybe they started off a little bit weak. I do like them all, but for me, I think they started off not as good, and then he actually got better as the time went on. And maybe that's because he got a bit more, he got older and he got better at being Bond. Maybe he was better, maybe at that point he thought he was James Bond for real, so it's like you can't distinguish between him and the older films, if that makes sense. Wouldn't it be the coolest thing to be able to write the next script or movie? I think the fans should be allowed to write the next James Bond movie. Screw Amazon over, because they're probably not going to produce anything worthwhile. And I would love to see more planes in James Bond. He doesn't fly enough planes. The last time he flew a plane was in Spectre, I believe, and he flew it down a mountain. Right, we've got 16.5 gallons here through the tanks. Coming up to 5,000, we're going to level off and then we'll continue at this altitude. In fact, no, we're doing a step climb, aren't we? So we'll have to go down to 4,000 feet. And then from there, we'll just continue on to the airport. Now we can select an arrival. We're expecting a runway, flight plan saying runway 06. So let's see what the weather's doing here at 06. QNH is, wow, we're on back onto hectopascals for Cuba. That's interesting. So 1017. Still very, very hot. And a wind of 45 at 10. So full flaps. ILS runway 06. That is what it said, isn't it? Runway 06 for London. Okay, so good. We've got an ILS available. 11050. That's good, that's set up now, and then we can get the course if we really want to. We can also select it on here, so we can select a approach ILS 06, and we're going for the UHA. We know we are. Load that in, and then we can see that when we go to file code, we can activate the approach. Looks like we've gone past 4,000 down to 3,000. My goodness, I'm not paying attention. I guess that's not too bad actually. That would just mean straight onto the approach from this altitude. Wow, what a flight this has been. Some good memories been made. Some good flying time as well. I'm now almost over 400 flying hours on the network. I have sort of like, I don't know, I can't even count the amount of hours I actually have on the sim. Total flight time, like my actual logbook, is well over 10,000 hours at this point. We're within range. We got the ACE information. We need to get the weather information later so we can consider it collected at this point, and we've already found it. We could do some more checks. So you know, count flaps are closed. We might actually, because it's so hot, we probably could have them open a little bit. We're gonna have them half open. That's going to create some drag though and slow us down a little bit, which could be a problem. We could also possibly, because it's over 20 degrees, need our fuel pumps on. Now I know from experience you are in fact meant to have them on if it's over this temperature, so we will be landing, I guess we should have had it on for takeoff as well. We will be landing and taking off with fuel pumps on, so we'll turn them on for the approach. Let's go direct to the approach. So 06 will be in the opposite direction. Let's turn our course, heading where we need to be, and we'll turn that to the runway as well, ready for the ILS. Actually, then again, we'll select the ILS on the VLOC and it'll show where it is automatically. Who will the next James Bond be, folks? Who do you want it to be? What would the next James Bond be about? We had a lot of speculation that actors like Henry Cavill. Not too bad of a choice. He was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. after all, and that was a good film. Still relatively... this is actually probably one of those most popular articles for James Bond. I think people write these articles all the time, and they always have. It feels like every month there's an article about who the next James Bond will be, and it's just been like that for years. The lineup's looking a little bit different than I expected. We have some contenders, I guess. Okay, auditions starting to play the secret agent. Auditions have now started, according to Bond experts. 12 men have walked on the moon, but half that number have played James Bond on the big screen. After years of non-stop speculation, Amazon MGM Studios announced via social media last week, and this article I'm reading is only from the 22nd of May, so not that long ago. The search for the next James Bond is underway. Wow, this is actually kind of exciting. So the next James Bond has already been auditioned for as we speak. Oh, this is going to be very interesting. Are they going to go American? Are they going to go English, Scottish, Irish? Are they going to go completely out of the ballpark and bring in a female James Bond, which would really, I think, be a middle finger to most of us. They've assembled an A-list creative team to resurrect the Bond brand. They don't need to resurrect it. I think that word in there needs to be changed. The Bond franchise is very much alive and well. It's just that they haven't made a film for 5 years. In fact, longer than that. It's more like 10 years since the last film was actually filmed. It may have been released in 2021, but No Time to Die was delayed by a couple of years. For no reason, by the way, at all, other than to make more money. Let's see then. Here are 5 things to 007 needs to be according to Bond experts. British. Yes, I agree with that. I think we should keep it British. And when I say British, I mean, you know, English, Scottish, Irish, Welsh. Anything from United Kingdom is fine. I mean, Pierce Brosnan was Irish, Sean Connery was Scottish, so there's no problem with them playing them as long as they have the British accent. Interestingly, actually, though, George Lazenby was Australian, but he doesn't sound it at all in the film. So that's the first prerequisite, British, or at least sound British. The second one, it needs to be younger. Kind of agree with that, kind of disagree with that. They do need to be old enough to have completed training, but also, I guess, young enough where they can still move about without the backs breaking. Third requirement, unknown. Bit of a strange list, this, because when A Shoot the Fire Pierce Brosnan started, he was already an actor at that point. He'd already been in a few films. The same as Roger Moore. Roger Moore had actually been in television series. And same with Daniel Craig. He'd also been in films prior to James Bond as well, and was actually a well-known actor at that time. But I think what they're trying to say is, what's going on with the engines here? We've got a issue with synchronization. Are we overheating them a little bit? Prop sync's not failed, has it? Let's bring the throttles down to 2500. No failed systems. It is getting out of sync though. Something is happening with the engines. A little bit strange. Let's bring them back to 2300. Ah, there we go. Maybe we're just running them a bit too fast for the altitude. So 2400 will be fine. Yeah, so the prerequisite list for the next James Bond. Being unknown, I guess, is something they want. And I think that's what we all want. I would like to see someone who we haven't seen before. But also, there are plenty of well-known actors who would, I think, do very well in the role. People like, I know this is a random thing to say and I don't want to support this choice, but I do think they're a good choice. Aaron Taylor-Johnson is a really good actor and he's British, and the films I've seen him in, like all the way from his starting, his earlier days and his earlier films all the way up to his recent ones, he really is quite good at his craft and he really looks like James Bond sometimes as well. Bring him in as James Bond, okay, and I would be actually pretty happy with that. Apparently it needs to be witty, yes. We need a bit more of that masculinity and egotistical humour at the same time. Fifth requirement, brutal. Beneath every Bond's outward charm is a dangerous brutality, and the volatile balance between the two has always been at the core of his appeal. Yes, but in the later years of Daniel Craig's films, he actually drank more alcohol and became a bit of a slob. So, I don't know. I think he needs to go back to being an actual spy and not an alcoholic. I think that's what they need to do. Brutal will come naturally with it. That's it. I mean, that's a very, very strange list of requirements. My requirement would be obviously British, male, of course. Non-alcoholic would be good. They took away the smoking, which I found really crazy because they still kept the alcohol in there. And I know I'm getting picky now, but this is a character that I love and a series that I love. They should get rid of the booze, I think. The smoking was not as bad. At least with smoking, you know, he's not gonna get He's not going to miss his shots on target with his smoke as a cigarette, is he? But if he drinks alcohol, as we saw in Skyfall, he will miss his shots and he'll actually end up in a dangerous situation. But to be fair, Skyfall was a great film though, probably one of the better ones of Daniel Craig's era. There's the airport. You can actually see it. So let's get this tuned in to nav 2. I guess we can get lined up a little bit. I wonder what it's taking us round the right side for 06. Oh, I see. So it's going to go, and then the go round will be 2,000 feet. Let's go down to 2,000 feet then. Let's say that the minimums are 200 feet for this approach. Go round altitude 2000. Let's get our mixtures fully rich. Props, I'm going to bring the props back actually for this one, and we'll do it a little bit differently. So let's bring them back 2300, and then we'll wait till final to put them fully forward. Wind is in fact in our favour, about 5 or 6 knots. Havana traffic, JB007 inbound for the ILS runway 06. Not that far out, folks. Welcome in if you're just coming into the flight. We're about to land, so let's go ahead and get landing lights on now. We're in the proximity of the airport. We will be passing over. Havana is literally right there in front of us. we're passing over and we're doing almost a figure of 8 arrival here. So we're doing a figure of 8 there onto final. Okay, even though we're going to take some lights on when we have the gear down as well, just to make ourselves more visible, because it is starting to go cloudy here. I kind of feel like we should hand fly this. There's not technically an instrument arrival here. There's no SID procedures or stars, etc. today. So we could, if we wanted to, hand fly it from this point. I want to do that. So let's just get the autopilot off. We are going to keep the flight director on because we'll be pressing approach so it can guide us in. But we'll be hand flying it. So let's get ourselves into a position where I feel comfortable with this approach. We can actually go, if we want, all the way straight there, but we're going to follow in general the runway length now. So let's get across onto downwind leg. We're at 2,000 feet for this procedure, which is absolutely acceptable. So at this point we'd probably turn outbound anyway. I'm going to go ahead and put the props to 2,500 RPM, but we're not going to push them all the way forward just yet. We are going to bring the manifold pressure back, all the way back to just between 17 and 1600. Now we are on the pink line about, but I can see the runway is, you know, relatively close to us, so it's literally right there. So we don't have to go all the way outbound on this flight. We can do it from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for us to slow down, and I'm going to drop a notch of flaps. I'm going to drop a notch of flaps there, and we're going to start to descend ever so slowly towards. We're going to pretend the runway is, you know, in front of us. We'll just start a descent and do a turning descent onto final, where we'll put the gear and flaps down, and we'll put the. In fact, we should probably put the gear down now because we're within the sort of range of it. We're really, really close. What I'm going to do is select approach, arm the approach, go into V-lock mode. Now we can turn this manually ourselves to runway 06. That will give us the course for the runway. So you have to turn around to that. Gear is down and locked. We have some free green lights. No, we don't. I'm imagining it. We have free green lights now. We have turned round almost towards the runway. So there it is. We're now coming into base leg for final. Propellers are going fully forward. Last notch of flaps. Taxi lights coming on, ready to taxi off the runway. And there we are, we're coming in a little bit shorter than what was planned, which is how I wanted it. I couldn't go all the way out for a long approach, didn't feel like it. So now we're on final, we've got the approach mode arms. We're just going to follow it down to the runway with our power as it is. Wind is a little bit stronger than I expected. It's now turned into a tailwind, which is not good. I ideally wanted a headwind for this. QNH is set, minimums are 200 feet. We're about 105, which is alright. Remember, we're only just ourselves today and fuel on board. There's no other people, so we're actually very, very light plane. We probably don't need as much power either. Here we are, we're coming down to 06. Nice and easy. And that was a rough landing. That was a very rough landing. Some might say a bolt landing. Yeah, I felt myself flaring too long on that one and then held it off too long and then reduced the power too quickly. So a little bit of a mistake on that landing. Still decent though. You know, it was a little bit hard, but we still made it out in one piece. Welcome to Cuba, Havana Airport, everybody. The name's Bond. James Bond. Right, let's taxi off the active runway and get to parking. We'll see what M has in queue for us when we get there. Strobes coming off. How's the engines doing? They look like they haven't died, so we can probably put transponders to Charlie mode. Weather radar comes off so we don't blow anything up. By accident, of course. And I think we can just... I was going to say, maybe cut through there, be a little bit cheeky. That's kind of what James Bond would do, I think. Oh, we got a hangar over there. Let's do a James Bond style thing. We could have gone down the taxiway, but we're going to just cut across the grass, which actually does look like a taxiway, to be fair. It looks like it is, but it isn't. Yeah, so name's Bond. James Bond. We're going to give it the respect it deserves. It's a very, very, very well-respected franchise, and people love it. I love it. I'm not disrespecting it today. I don't want you to feel like that at all. Today was in memory of that, and in just to celebrate how great it is, really. That we can go back and watch. There's like 25 films now or something. So we're really spoiled for choice in terms of movies. Yeah, this was a slight taxiway as well. It's got like a road there. Feels like the brake. Feels like something's going on with the brakes or something. Maybe the parking brake is on. Unless we popped our tyres. Maybe we popped our tyres, everybody. There's no way to tell unless you park up. Yeah, I think that's why it's so bumpy. We may have burst a few of them on landing. Oh well. I think that's a typical James Bond landing. Not exactly a qualified pilot, but still knows how to fly a plane. Which is most of us on the flight simulations nowadays. Oh yeah, it does affect the performance, which is really cool to see. So I'm sort of just looking for any space at the moment. We don't need GA parking for it. Yeah, you can hear the tyres. It's really rough. He came here in 2002's Die Another Day. That's a film I remember him coming here for. He came here, he got some cigars, he got his beautiful blue BMW. And then he took his documentation to get into somewhere else. I think it was Cuba, wasn't it? We're going to park here with the airliners. He just pulls up in the plane next to British Airways. I have a number for you to call. I'm sure you do. There's something there he would probably say. Okay, brakes on. We could do this easily. Taxi nav lights off, and I'm going to switch all the switches off today just because I feel like it. Avionics. Fuel into cut off mode. Everything's coming off. You don't have to do this, but I want to. There we go, plane shutting down. Let's check whether we had a flat tire or not. So let's see the tire conditions. No, it says it's okay. I wonder why then it was like that on the ground. It's very, very bumpy when we were taxiing on the concrete. Doesn't say we burst them at all. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. It's been good to remember James Bond and its sort of beginning from 1950s into from a naval officer to an actual character to an actual cultural icon. Quite the journey. Thank you for joining me. Stick around for the replay. Let's see how rough it was. Come on, outside view. Here we are, coming into the land, nice and white. It sounds rough. It looked rough, but it was actually quite smooth. Thank you once again. Thank you to the regulars and the newcomers. I will see you on the next flight. I will see you on the next video. All the best. Join me for the next one as we fly to the place that James Bond was actually filmed. We will be flying to the movie studios. Join me then. Take care.